Once again, I would like to, while we come back to the seats, I do want to just say as an East Coast guy, it's phenomenal to see what a good job everybody here has done. I especially want to thank Bob Bowen and Kate. You guys have done a great job. You guys have been phenomenal. A round of applause for them again. Joe Herget, apparently you haven't quit yet, so apparently you're holding on to the job just fine. So Joe Herget, just really want to wish you the best of luck going forward with this wonderful job here that they're doing in Davis. And Lydia, it's almost over. Okay, Lydia? Just hang on. And we're all going back to your house. Is that true, Lydia, after this? All right. We're going to move on to inductee number 3. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's third inductee is George Mallory Hendy.
Born in 1866, George Mallory Hendy grew up in the wake of the American Civil War. During his 76 years, Hendy would witness and contribute to one of the most remarkable periods in American history. As a young boy in Watertown, Massachusetts, Hendy dreamed of two-wheeled machines. At the tender age of 16, Hendy catapulted to fame by winning the American Amateur National Championship, a title he would repeat for 3 consecutive years in 1882, 1883, and 1884. By the time he was 21, Hendy confirmed his place among the best cyclists in the world. And during a time when cyclists were America's favorite athletes, Hendy was a bona fide superstar. On a dusty dirt track in 1886, riding a high-wheel bicycle, young George set a world record for the half mile, clocking a time of 2 minutes, 27 seconds. His half-mile world record stood for 6 years. During his 16-year career, from 1882 to 1897, Hendy raced in 309 sanctioned bike races. He won 302 of them. Averaging more than 1 race a month for 16 straight years, Hendy set countless records on the high-wheel bicycle, winning championships in 2-mile, 5-mile, 10-mile, and 20-mile events along the way. Even in the year he retired from professional cycling in 1897, Hendy was still the undisputed king of cyclists worldwide. That very year, at the age of 29, Hendy won the World Championship. With the fortune he amassed as one of the most popular athletes of his time, Hendy turned his attention to the burgeoning Industrial Revolution. In 1897, he founded a manufacturing company in Springfield, Massachusetts, and began producing bicycles under a brand that bore his name, Hendy's Safeties. While continuing to serve in the National Cycling Association, Hendy ushered in the 1900s by creating America's first mass-produced gasoline-powered motorcycle. The Indian brand motorcycle would become one of America's premier industrial machines, and by 1912, his 11-year-old motorcycle company was the world's largest. George Hendy, America's first true champion of two wheels.
Not bad. You know, I think that of all the things that the Hall of Fame does, it's that section right there that really makes it important. And I know that I had the, I guess it was the misfortune of racing against Davis Finney and having him beat me several times. But it's just so important that we remember this, and this is what we do so well. And I know special thanks to Peter Nine, so many people that are keeping this alive. I can't say how important this is going forward and why I'm going to continue to support this great institution. To introduce the presenter for George Mallory Hendy, please welcome Laura Dillman.
How indeed. It is truly a pleasure to be here this evening, and I'm overwhelmed with the amount of talent and dedication in the room. It's a privilege to be able to celebrate this event with you and the contributions of all the cyclists and the contributors, as well as the ongoing success of the U.S. Bicycling Hall of Fame. Almost 8 years ago, I had the great good fortune to meet an amazing woman who spent much of her childhood growing up with George Mallory Hendy. Her engaging stories of the time that she spent with him brought to life a truly remarkable man, a kind man, and one who doted on her as much as she worshiped him. You would be amazed at the voluminous photo albums and scrapbooks that she has compiled over the years, documenting his life and his accomplishments. She continues to preserve his legacy through speaking engagements with PowerPoint presentations to various organizations up in our area of New England. And just this year, at the age of, I'm not going to tell him, she wrote a book about his life and his careers as a cyclist, an entrepreneur, a farmer, and finally a philanthropist. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you my dear friend and the #1 cheerleader for George Mallory Hendy, his niece, June Hale Cook.
You were bigger, brighter, wider than snow. Screamed at the make-believe, screamed at the stone. You finally found all your courage to let it all go.
Oh, thank you all very much. First of all, I want to thank the Bicycling Hall of Fame and everybody that had anything to do with this. It's a great honor for my uncle, and I'm really pleased and happy to be here. It's a great honor. It's been a long time. Of course, I wasn't around when he was doing his bicycling, but I had 18 years with him, and he was just such a warm and caring and generous and thoughtful man. As I said, I only had 18 years, but I believe it's because of him he contributed to my being the person that I am today. He didn't remain the slim young man that you saw in this film in his bicycle days. Shall I say he was portly? He could outdo Santa Claus. He didn't need a pillow. In fact, when I was about 6 years old, my aunt and uncle came for dinner, on Christmas Eve, and they came for dinner, but my uncle wasn't there. And I said, where's he? Well, he had to be at the Shriners Hospital. Well, it wasn't too long after that, and we heard the bells, the Christmas bells, and then the back door opened, and I heard the stomping on the porch, and I was scared, what's going on? And my aunt said, well, be quiet, shh, it's to Santa Claus. And if you let him know that you're watching, he might leave. So we watched him around the corner, and he came in, and he went up the hall, ho, 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 Merry Christmas. And we watched him fill our stockings, and he walked back down the hall with ho, 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 and out the door, and we heard the bells. Of course, it wasn't until a couple of years later when we realized it was not Santa Claus. But he did a lot of wonderful little things for us and for my brother, but mainly for me. We went down to the mansion often, and a lot for Sunday dinners and every single holiday. And he'd say, come sit on my lap, little one. Well, he didn't have a lap. And I would sit on this little portion that was left up from his knee. And we would just sit and talk. He saw that I had piano lessons when I was very young. And he so enjoyed my playing the piano, and I'm no Liberace, I'll tell you that. But he loved the songs, and he would sit there in Charlie in trance, and here's this kid playing the piano. I thought he'd be doing something else, reading a book or doing this on paper or something. No, he'd sit right there, and then he'd ask for his request, play this one, play that one. So we had great times together. And the estate, there were lots of nature trails, and we used to do a lot of walking. And we played miniature golf and croquet, and he'd read a lot to me when I was a little girl. And I love books. And I think I got that not from just my dad, but from my uncle, too. And after his high bicycling ride days were over, you could see from the film that he went on to do other great things. And he continued his education, and he had a few odd jobs, but he missed bicycling, and he ended up selling bicycles. And then he continued on with that, and he established the Hendy manufacturing company, and he was manufacturing and selling the Silver King and the Silver Queen bicycles. And he went to a race at the Coliseum in New York City, and he met Oscar Hedstrom. He was the motorcycle wizard. And he talked with him, and he agreed to design and construct what became the first Indian. In April 1915, he married my father's sister. And shortly after that, he sold out his interest in the company to devote to his 500-acre estate in Suffield, Connecticut. And it was a beautiful estate, mansion, and a very large 20,000 foot, I think it is, mansion barn that is still there. And the lady that introduced me was past president of a group called Friends of the Farm at Hilltop, and they are restoring my uncle's barn. They have the barn and some of the buildings around it, and they're doing a magnificent job. So he was devoted at that time just to maintaining the mansion and the farm. It became a very prestigious dairy farm, and he was known far and wide for his prize Guernsey cattle. He took a time away from his estate at the age of 51, and he volunteered with the YMCA and was overseas for, I think it was about 16, 17 months he was working overseas for the YMCA. He had lots of stories to tell about that. In the 1920s, he was instrumental in bringing the Shriners Hospital to Springfield, Massachusetts. And it was opened in 1925, the year that I was born. And he was the chairman of Board of Governors from that time on until 1937, when he had to resign because of his health. He was loved by the children at the hospital, and he loved the kids. He loved children, and he would try to be at the hospital to see the children before and after surgery. He had one little boy that it's been written up a number of times. He was lying in his bed, and my uncle went in every morning. He'd say, "And how are you today, little boy?" And he said, "Fine, Mr. Hendy." And the morning of his operation, he went in, "And how are you?" And he said, "Fine, Mr. Hendy." They didn't have much of a conversation, but he was there right through all of his surgeries. And he loved the kids. He would take me up there on Christmas for the Christmas parties that they gave to the children. And he just beamed when he was around children. And he certainly was good to me. He was a generous philanthropist. He gave generously of his time and his money, and he was awarded many, many awards over the years. We have a award in our area. It is called the William Pynchon Award, and he won that award, and he won many for the shrine. There's a building in Springfield, Massachusetts, with a tower. It's called the Campanile, and he donated a bell for the tower in honor of his father. They sold the estate just a few years before he passed away, and it was a beautiful estate. And even though he was ill, we got to go out every day. And he died on the 13th of June in 1943, just before my 18th birthday. So I just wanted to tell you these few little things about my uncle, and I thank everyone for this wonderful occasion and to honor my uncle. I'm overwhelmed with it. And thank you all very, very much.
Wow. I always laugh because I was in a bike shop about 10, 15 years ago, and there's that beautiful World Championship poster of the 1981 Worlds with Martens is winning, Cerrone's there. They're all there. Eno is there. And the crowd's great, and there was some Joker Cat 3s in the shop, and they were saying something like, look at these guys, they have down tube levers. Those guys couldn't beat a Cat 3 today. So. And little do they know how good these guys were. Phenomenal. And again, this is why we do what we're doing at the Hall of Fame, and I encourage you all to support it. A lot of people got into this sport in the 70s. I did. After the oil embargo, a lot of people started riding bikes. And I, of course, came through. There was two doors that you could come into cycling. You either came through the sport door or the hippie door. I came through the hippie door. I had long hair at one time. And, you're health conscious, you're environmental, it's all that stuff. And I'll never forget, I came through Florida and was able to win a lot of bike races there. So some guy named Mike Frazee was calling around. He asked me to go up to ride for his Paris sport team, NJBC. And I'll never forget, I showed up in, I want to say it was 1979, racing in Central Park. Now, I was used to like health conscious, hemp skirt, everybody was a really naturalist, vegetarian, it's all good, man. And you show up to race in New York City, and the pace car is a Eldorado convertible that has 4 guys, and just cigar smoke is wafting out of the car. And I was like, this is so not right. Well, a lot of people don't realize New York City is a great cycling city. Maybe one of the greatest cycling cities, not just in America, but in the world. And I always sort of, I hate it when Phil Liggett and Paul Sherwin say there's George Hincapie, he comes from South Carolina. He doesn't. He comes from New York City. And so too does our next inductee. Right now, our next inductee is going to be the great Mike McCarthy from New York City. Mike McCarthy.
Mike McCarthy, very experienced in this kind of race. It would be difficult to name a race in which Mike McCarthy is not real experienced. If there's somebody better, I don't know who it is.
As a teenager in New York City, Mike McCarthy always dreamed of joining the bike racers who circled Central Park. When his mother brought home a Raleigh 10-speed on his 14th birthday, he rode into the park and never looked back. From his Manhattan bedroom, adorned with posters of cycling greats like Eddie Merckx, Bernard Hinault, and Greg LeMond, Mike McCarthy ate, slept, and even showered with his bicycle. By the end of his first year of racing in 1982, McCarthy had transformed his training base of hour-long time trials around Central Park into a district championship and an invitation to the Olympic Training Center. During his 17-year career, between 1982 and 1999, McCarthy established himself as one of America's premier cyclists, becoming the world champion in 1992. Between road races, criteriums, and the track, McCarthy won 17 U.S. National Cycling Championships during his storied career. Mike McCarthy won his first national championship as a junior in 1985, a feat he repeated in 1986. In 1987, he won Pan American Games gold in the team pursuit and won 2 more gold medals at the 1998 Goodwill Games in the elimination and scratch races on the track.
And indeed, it is Mike McCarthy setting pace.
He'll challenge anyone who tries to take that front position away from him. Well, Mike McCarthy has made the right move at the right time.
He made the perfect move, and like you said, at the perfect time.
McCarthy rounded out the 1980s, winning amateur national championships in 1988 and 1989 while racing for the GS Mangoni amateur cycling team. All told, McCarthy's career included 5 junior national road and track titles, the U.S. Pro Criterium title, and nearly a dozen other national championships on the road and track. McCarthy wore many jerseys during his career, sponsored by Sungkyung SKC, Celestial Seasons, Subaru Montgomery, and Saturn. But his finest moments came in the Stars and Stripes. He represented the United States regularly in international competition, including 2 Olympic Games. McCarthy powered the American team pursuit at the 1988 Olympics in Seoul and the 1996 Games in Atlanta. He also left his mark on international competition as a member of the 1989 World Championship 100-kilometer team time trial team and brought home a bronze medal in pursuit at the 1990 World Amateur Championships. McCarthy also brought home a gold medal in the individual pursuit from the 1992 Professional World Championships. From teenage hopeful to professional star and world champion, Mike McCarthy became one of the greats. And along the way, he inspired a new generation of young racers to peer out their windows and dream.
Ladies and gentlemen, to present Mike McCarthy is the great Joe Sailing.
Mrs. Cook, that was Santa Claus, by the way. Mr. Freeze, no disrespect. You said he beat you several times, Mr. Finney. He beat you every time. As he did most of his competitors. I had this whole page written up of stuff. You know, I spent 5 minutes, 10 minutes, some emails back and forth with Mike to get this information, but it was all in that video just now. So I will say that Mike began his cycling career in 1978 at Casina in the kids program. And because of a work schedule that his mom experienced, he couldn't no longer go to that, and he took a 4-year hiatus from cycling. And when he came back, he was a member of the Century Road Club Association, one of the oldest cycling clubs in the United States. And as they said on the video, Mike's first national championships were in 1988. I will say that, and Richard Freeze will back me up on this, one of the real, not problems, but one of the most difficult things as the job of an announcer is getting guys back and women back, winners and top placers for post-race interviews and the podium. And I'll tell you, Mike McCarthy made the job of an announcer very, very good, because this guy was back immediately, win, lose, or draw, clean jersey, combed hair, always a good word to say about sponsors, the bike race. Just made my job easier, and I'm quite sure you've had the opportunity to have the same situation, Richard. He rode for some of the premier cycling teams. One of them mentioned was GS Mangoni. Fred Mangoni, the patron of that particular club, is a member of the U.S. Bicycling Hall of Fame. I will say that in 1992 in Valencia, Spain, the International Cycling Union ran an event for the final time, the World's Professional Pursuit Championship. And before I finished that, I forgot something, and my apologies. When Dottie was up here and she said, talking about our 48 years of wedded bliss, she said, it seemed like only yesterday. And that's just a deal we've been having between the two of us for the last 48 years. One of us will say, it seemed like only yesterday, and the other one's supposed to say, what a hell of a day yesterday was. And you see, she gave me the opportunity and told me she had an answer once I gave her the hell of a day yesterday, but it was a great day. So my apologies for getting off of Mike McCarthy, and my apologies, Mike. So, ladies and gentlemen, in 1992, as I said, the International Cycling Union ran the final professional pursuit championship of the world in Spain. So I present to you, ladies and gentlemen, for induction to the 2010 class of the U.S. Bicycling Hall of Fame, my friend and the undefeated professional champion of the world, Mr. Mike McCarthy.
That's great. Joe left me some notes, too. I have to tell you, for an East Coast bike racer, there is no greater honor or pleasure than having Joe Sailing call your name. So thanks very much, Joe. And I hate to think that was the last time I heard you say it, but it just might be. So I sort of put a lot of thought into this speech and was pretty gripped about it. And wasn't really sure what I wanted to say. And then I went back and talked to the bartender for a while, and he was full of great ideas. And then Taylor came up and talked about the Tour of Bermuda, and I felt even better because I actually won that race. And I thought, man, if this was, T's talking about that race and I won it, I must be all right. So it was a good start. Anyway, I think many of us who've stood up in this position, it's an interesting process because they tell you you've been nominated, and you think, oh, that's so cool, and then they tell you didn't get in. And then you come back the next year and they say, hey, you got in, and then you have like 5 months to think about what you want to say. And every night you go to sleep and you think, I have the perfect speech. I'm totally dialed in. And then in the morning you've forgotten the whole thing and you start from scratch again. So a little bit of a challenge, and I trust my pal John Haraga down there. He said he'd put his hand up if I started wandering too much or got too lengthy, and I looked behind for the guy with the hook before and he wasn't there, so I think I'm safe for right now. But many of you probably never even heard of me before this. I grew up in the pre-internet age of cycling, and those of you who do know me probably don't recognize me in natural fibers, but I do exist. And to put all my father's fears to rest, I have to tell you, my dad followed me around last night at the reception at the hall, and everybody that I spoke with, I heard this little voice behind me go, I know Michael doesn't seem really excited, but he's thrilled. And I have to tell you that I am so stoked to be up here and to be a part of this family, and I can't even tell you how much it means. When I look at the members of the Hall of Fame and the people that I'm joining up here, whether it's the pre-modern cyclists, whether it's the contributors, whether it's guys that I raced with and mentored and had posters on my wall, it is so absolutely special. And thank you so much to Eddie Albert and Wayne Stetna for pushing me through. And McCarthy did come before Sutter. Sutter did not come before McCarthy, just so we're clear about that. Anyway, so I was actually a Fed brat too. I grew up in the pre-Steve Johnson program that was in shambles, but somehow made my way through that. So bear with me because I got auto-corrected on all my iPad notes up here. So they turned all the cycling into like psychological, and so I'm doing a little bit of translation as I go. I will say that settle down, seriously. I'm trying to say something. So being subjectively judged as a cyclist is a really, really difficult thing. When Ernie Subert called me in June, I was a little bit shocked and I didn't know what to do. And I thought, well, do you put your hands up? And then it kind of sunk in, and that's sort of my instinct. But to be voted into the Hall of Fame and to be a member of this incredible organization, and with all the people that are in there, is special. To have that done by your peers, and people that you've known for years and years and who've watched you race, to be judged by those people as one of the finest in the sport, is unbelievable. And I think that's where it really sunk in with me, to think that, and I think you voted for me, Davis, but to think that somebody actually sat down and checked that box and said that Mike deserves to be there, is pretty special. I'm going to share a bunch of little stories. First of all, anybody have any questions before I go? I'm really good with questions and not so good with speeches, so if at any time somebody's got a question, just do the school thing and put your hand up and I'll try to answer. But I came up here a couple years ago to introduce Jeannie Golay and talk about her leopard skin outfits that she used to wear and stuff. And I walked in and I'm looking around and I'm like, wow, man, this, old, cool, like these guys that I had read about in books. And all of a sudden, I turned and I looked, and I'm sort of like one of those name tag guys. I try to do the secret, I'm going to look at the name tag because I have no idea who that is, even if I just met them. But I look at this name tag and I just froze. The name tag said George Mount on it. And I knew George was going to love this. And I'm going to tell you about George Mount. So in 1982, when I started bike racing, I went to Barnes & Noble on 16th Street and 5th Avenue and looked through their Sports by Alphabet section. And somewhere between badminton and bocce, there was a book about cycling. And I grabbed the book. It was the only book on the shelf, and it was called The Bicycle Racing Book. And no kid has ever read a book more than I read The Bicycle Racing Book. I don't care whether it was Dr. Seuss or whatever, The Cat in the Hat. I read that bicycle racing book day in and day out. And that book was so destroyed by the time I don't know, we moved, or I've lost track of the book. But anyway, it was written in the late 70s, and of course, the main character in this book at the time, aside from the Stettner brothers, was this guy named George Mount. And so when I walked in here and I saw it, and I consider myself to be a little bit of a student of the sport, not to Peter Nye kind of lengths, but I enjoy, understanding the history of the sport. But seeing George here, I was like, holy cow, this place, this is serious business here, And so I just want to thank George for coming out again tonight, because, that was a very important moment in my first real touch to the Hall of Fame. I have to say, when it was in Somerville, I was so preoccupied with trying to lose that race again, which I seemed to really do well over my career. Trying to fit through toaster-sized holes next to the fence every sprint instead of going the long way around and just winning, I never made it to the old Hall of Fame. So I'm especially pleased because I live about an hour and a half down the road there, and I can come up here anytime and check it out, especially because I don't have to worry about losing another race. So the question I get asked quite often is, like, how does a fat kid, with Twinkie stuff in his back pockets go from Central Park to the Hall of Fame? And the answer is pretty simple, and it has a lot to do with love and passion. And I say that there are three ingredients that go into making a great cyclist, and those are passion, psychology, and physiology. I had phenomenal passion for this sport. I had pretty good psychology. I'll tell you a little story about that in a minute, or maybe not. But physiologically, I tested like a junior when I was a pro. I was never particularly gifted in that department. But I kind of figured things out as I went. And everyone comes up here, and this is no offense to anyone that said it. And first of all, I want to thank my family for coming and kind of get that out of the way. I love you guys. And, But more importantly, I want to, people come up and they say, I want to thank all the people that believed in me. And quite frankly, I want to thank all the people that didn't believe in me. Because I took no more pride in my cycling in 17 years than getting on the line and proving those people wrong. That was why I lined up every time, because people doubted. They always doubted. And they said, you can't do it, you have no chance. And when I was up there on the podium, getting the check and the flowers and whatever, I thought, well, hey, thanks for that motivation, because that kind of helped me out a lot. And so I appreciate that. So I want to say thanks very much to the non-believers tonight. You sure did give me a lot of motivation. So as I said, I have some kind of fun stories, and I talk to juniors quite a bit, and now I've started talking to junior swimmers. They have no idea what I'm talking about, because my daughter's a swimmer, and she's got me all confused with stuff. But I have a couple interesting stories, and this one sort of works right in with the non-believers, and this is not to say that this gentleman in any way, shape, or form was a non-believer forever. He certainly believed in me, but in 1985, it was in my first year of eligibility to go to Europe as a junior, and I had been riding pretty well and done well at our April camp, and then they were picking the team to go to this race called the Dusica Tour, and actually in that video they kept showing the yellow jersey with the thing on the top there, and I don't even know what it's called, but that was the leader's jersey from the Dusica Tour. But in 1985, I was eligible to go to that race. And I was still not what people really thought of when, I got asked if I was the mechanic a lot when I was on the road with the team. They're like, oh, you're here for the bike race? That's so cool. You're the mechanic? And I was like, no, I ride, It's just more motivation. But so they had to pick 4 riders to go on this trip. And Eddie B summons myself and my very good friend Scott McKinley into his office. And there was 1 spot left. There were essentially 3 guys that were already on the team. My God, I'm serious. I'm only like a third of the way down the page right now. If it gets too long, just somebody. But Eddie summons us into the office, and he sits down. And I'm not going to do an Eddie B imitation. I know some of you know, it's kind of my thing. But Eddie says, so gentlemen, I have 1 spot left, and 2 of you, and it's a very difficult decision. He said, Mr. McCarthy, you're riding incredibly well, and I love what you're doing on the bike. You've won every race in the trials, and really, you should be in good shape for the Worlds. But Mr. McKinley has a much better body for cycling. Not so funny, to tell you the truth, right? And so I'm sitting in his office, and one of these the things come in, and I'm like, oh God, don't cry in front of the Polish guy, not cool, and I'm choking back the tears, and I nodded my head, and I was like, all right, and I walked back up to my room, and I got up there, and the next morning I got on a plane, and I flew back to New York, where I was comfortable. At the time I was a resident athlete, and I was very uncomfortable in Colorado. But I went back to Mama, and I said, Mama, I'm gonna ride some bike races. And in the month of May of 1985, I raced 27 times. Anytime they were giving out numbers, I was there. And I won a lot of races, and I lost a lot of races, and I learned a lot about bike racing. And while some guys thrive on a CompuTrainer, I thrived with bike racing. And when I went back to the World's Trials, which were in June, I didn't lose a race. And that, to me, defined my career. When somebody told me that they didn't believe, again, or they didn't think that I had the talent to do something, I was really into proving them wrong. So great moment in cycling for me. There are 3 kinds of fun in this world. There's fun, things that you do, and you think they're fun while you're doing them, and then you wake up in the morning, you go, oh man, that wasn't as much fun as I remembered. And then there are certain things, and I won't get too far into them because there are children present, but they're fun while you're doing them, and then they're fun when you think about them afterwards. And then there's what I call, the fun that I find most gratifying in this world. And that is the kind of fun that's not fun while you're doing it at all. In fact, it's the kind of fun that most people would just call misery. But when you're done, the first thing you think was, that was the best thing I've ever done, and I can't wait to go do it again. And so to me, that's true fun. And that, to me, was bike racing, because quite frankly, winning bike races isn't fun until you cross the line. I probably thought about quitting more races that I eventually won than races I felt really good in. Because there are times when and Davis talked about T suffering in Tour de l'Avenir. And you know what, sometimes you just have to gut it out like that. And I think, Taylor would probably agree that That's why he was able to go to Australia, you know, and post some awfully nice results. And thank God I'm getting in now, because if I had to compete with a guy who already has, like, what are you, 12, and you already have 5 world championships, and you're like 6'3". So I think my gift in this sport was not my physiology, but it was finding ways to get things done. Some of you have seen my bike in the back, or that's actually not the right bike, but the bike they had on display last night, and people were asking me about it, and I said, I don't know if it's fast or not, but it sure did look cool, and it worked, and it psyched everybody out. And that's actually the greatest headline that I've ever read as an athlete that was about me, which wasn't many, but the headline in the sports paper in Spain the day after I won my world championship said, the beauty of cycling, because I had beaten this Lotus Superbike in the final, and I forget who was riding it. It's sort of irrelevant, though, because it was all about the bike there. Sorry, Sean Wallace. But the headline in the paper the next day said, the beauty of cycling is that it's not Formula One. It is not about the machine. It's about the rider. And I just thought, well, that's a really beautiful thing to hear as an athlete, because that's kind of what I believe. And no matter what kind of bike they put you on, if you're good enough, you're going to win. So tenacity and finding ways to win, I think, were the reason that I stand up here today. Well, okay, I just contradicted my next point. So scratch that one. And I'm going to avoid getting serious, because it's not my nature. But, you know, I thought a lot about why I was inducted. And I think a tremendous part of the reason is because I always had good people around me. And I think if I think about the choices I made in the sport, it always involved choosing the people that I wanted to be around, the people I wanted to surround myself with. In essence, creating a runway to success in this sport. And there's a little bit of guilt in me right now, because I think about all the riders that helped me, and all the support staff, and all the coaches, and the people that drove me to races, and the people that sponsored me and supported me throughout the years. And I think, well, gee, those people really deserve to be up here too. And in essence, they are, because that's you know, who I am, and that's what brought the results. I have a great story. There's a little connection to Davis here, so I thought a little bit about Davis stories, but I'm going to tell 2 Davis stories right now. And one of them you're involved with, the other one you're not, but still. I know that doesn't make any sense. It will. But 19-something or other Tour de Trump, I was somehow in the sprint jersey after a couple of days. And there was a big, square-jawed, big cheekbone German fellow by the name of Olaf Ludwig, who wanted my shirt. And you know, he was kind of like this, the guy in Rocky, the Russian guy, you know, like, I'll break you, right? And I was like, oh, that's Ludwig, man, that guy's good. And so we're coming to the first point sprint of the day, and all Ludwig needed was like a point to take the jersey, and it was done. And I'm like, there is no way. I think I got the jersey in a breakaway the day before or something, and I'm like, I'm not even going to bother sprinting. And Davis rides up next to me, and he goes, dude, why aren't you up there for the sprint? It's like 2K to go. And I was like, Davis, I'm not going to beat Ludwig in the sprint. Let's be real here. He goes, dude, how are you going to know unless you try? And like this little light went off. I'm like, bing. Like, that kind of makes sense, you know? You got to try if you want to win. It's kind of like the lottery. And so I roll up there, you know, and I got my big Bow glasses on at the time, and I'm riding, and I look over, and there's Ludwig, and he gives me that, you got to be kidding me look, right? So we pass, you know, 1K to the sprint, 500 meters to the sprint, and I come off somebody's wheel, and I think, I got it, right? And all of a sudden, like, there is, you know, I'm like a traffic cop. Here comes Ludwig. And I was like, huh? But Ludwig got a little ahead of himself there. And what he forgot to do after about 50 meters in the sprint is pedal. He thought, I just crushed this guy, right? And so I see him, and I'm like, he thinks he beat me. And I came right back around him, and I won the sprint. And that was the day I realized, like, you know, if you're not trying, you have no chance at all. So after that, I mean, he won the stage, and I never saw the jersey again. But still, it was this kind of, it was just the coolest thing to go up there and like crush this guy. And this guy, I mean, he had so much hardware, he had to be big, you know? He's like one of these guys, just from his, I'm sure he's gonna have some kind of back problem when he's old, because he's got these medals. You know, plus he's like the old East German thing, you know, so he's like that anyway. Sorry. Story number 2. All right, I'm on a roll. So I talk about the runway and the support and everything, and we were at the Bastille Day Criterium in Milwaukee, and I was riding for Saturn at the time, and our bike sponsor was Trek. And of course, Trek's pretty close to, they're in Wisconsin, they were close, so they bring their whole crew, the Burks and the marketing people down to watch the Bastille race, and Tom Schuler is like, you know, I never really tell you guys that I care if you win, but I really care if you win today. And so we're like, okay, no pressure, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it's 104 degrees, the humidity is about 99. We got the Saturn Mafia on the front, and all of a sudden, McCarthy's in the brake. And I'm going, oh, Christ, this is going to be really ugly, you know? Like, I'm suffering, I'm dying, I'm cramping already. We're 5 miles into the race. And of course, this brake succeeds and laps the field, and Jean-Paul Van Poppel, who was a big superstar there, looks over at me about halfway through this break, and he says, you need to win, don't you? And I said, I really need to win. He goes, okay, well, let's get a lap, and then you can deal with it. When you get there, I'm going to drop out. I was like, okay, easy for you to say. So we get around, and Davis's longtime teammate and partner, Ron Kiefel, was on the Saturn team at the time. So Ron looks at me and he goes, stay with me. And all of a sudden, like, I have the weight of the world on my shoulders, because Davis won like 3,000 races coming off of Ron's wheel, right? And so if I lose, like, you know, this is one of these, like, ride to the airport. If you lose, just keep riding to the airport and go home. If you lose the wheel in the sprint, and now staying on Ron's wheel, Davis will tell you, it could oftentimes be a big challenge in itself, because the Wookiee, man, that guy could go around corners really fast. And lo and behold, I only came like 3 bikes off his wheel in the last corner, and fortunately everybody else was like 10 bikes behind at that time, and I coasted across the line, and you know, I won the race. But man, oh man, you know, you talk about the pressure and the runway, and I was always a guy that feared losing much more than I enjoyed winning. So those days were pretty special. And you know, again, standing up here and thinking about like Norm Alvis and Jim Copeland and Scott Fortner and all the guys that put their nose in the wind for you week in and week out to win these races, and the coaches that would drive the car for hours and hours and hours. And I mean, my junior coach, Craig Campbell, I think the guy had a full-time coaching position for like $3,500 a year and a free room at the OTC. Yeah, you know. And yet he's like babysat us for years and years and years. So those are the people that I'd really like to acknowledge. I always thought racing was a really private thing. I never understood that people elsewhere noticed what I was doing. Until I was in Valencia, Spain, and Butch Martin said a funny thing to me the other day. He said, you know, I watched that race on TV, and I thought, that race was on TV? But when I got back to the hotel from that, it was a very interesting ride. I just won the Worlds, right? And I know it's like old hat to you, you know, Mr. 5-time world champion. But for me, it was a big deal. So I get back to the hotel, and I'm like, you know, I'm kind of in this daze. I don't even know what to think. It hasn't really sunk in yet. I had been on a mission. In the 6 weeks before Worlds, I lost 16 pounds. I had trained 3 times a day, and was never, ever before or after that was as singularly focused as I was during that period of time. I always wish I could go back and channel that again. And for some reason it never happened. My ultimate goal in cycling had always been to win the world championships. And once I got past that, it seemed like that focus was pretty hard to come by again. But I get back to the hotel, and there was a fax there. And I said, like, oh, I got a fax in Spain? You know, this is kind of weird. And on the fax was this whole note from Frankie Andreo and all the guys that were sitting in Italy riding the Prima Mondiale races, which is what you ride in the old days, is what you rode before you went to ride the World's Road Race. And it was this whole congratulations letter. And I thought, man, this is so cool. Like, somebody actually knows that I won this race, besides the 4 officials and 16 fans that were in the stands at that time. And quite honestly, sharing these experiences with everyone that's here tonight is a very, very new experience for me. I'm not a guy that talks a lot about what I've done on the bike. I'm not a guy who, ever thought that it was anything more than normal. For me, But it's a pretty cool thing. Am I getting close to this? No? All right. Okay, so I started here, and I'm down to here already. We're in good shape. Anyone want to refill the glasses? Potty break? Anyone? Good? Okay. So, interestingly enough, they talked a lot about nationals, and they talked a lot about the Goodwill Games and stuff. I think Worlds were probably my defining moment as a cyclist, but not necessarily ones that defined my cycling career. Personally defined my cycling career. Winning the 1986 Road Nationals as a junior when I was on the line with 16 guys dressed like Slurpees, and I was in the middle with my GS Mangione jersey, was really, really cool. But perhaps my favorite win outside of that one in Spain was winning the GS Mangione Grand Prix in Central Park. Many people can tell you that I failed miserably in many attempts to win that race. And after 12 times getting second in my backyard, the cavalry finally came in. And Frankie and Mark McCormick were on my team at the time, and Frankie was so sick of hearing me talk about the Mangione Grand Prix and how I'm going to lose again. And he goes, "Miko, I think Marco and I are going to come down and help you out in that one this time, all right?" And I said, "All right, Frankie." And that was another example of a race I really didn't have to pedal across the line much in, because by the time Frankie, pulled over, which was about 30 meters to the line, we were like bike lengths in front of the next guy, and I didn't know whether to put my hands in the air or laugh or cry or what. But you got to understand, New York really is a huge cycling community, and kind of being like the hotshot in the park was a big deal. And to get beaten by like these guys that nobody knew or ever heard of, or God, Mallory Gafer beat me there. That was horrible. But he was a dirty sprinter, I'll tell you that much. But to win that race meant so much to me. And unfortunately, then the next spring I went back, and my little girl was a month old, and I went to the Tour of Somerville. I didn't go back. I went to the Tour of Somerville, and I said, "This is the time I'm finally going to get this one." And Frankie and Mark were there. And that was the year I tried to go through the toaster-sized hole against Brett Aiken along the barricades, and I don't know, it was pretty close. Joe, you could have helped me with that one, I think. Anyway, cycling's provided so many incredible opportunities, traveling and friendships and good times. And when I think back upon it, I think you can tell by my tone that I have not just a great love for the sport, but a great love for the experiences that it's given me. When people say that must have been really hard, I say, it was really fun. And I think that it's important to remember that. Real life is nowhere near as fun as bike racing is. I'll tell you that much. Yeah, lots of travel, good times, great friends, and then it gave me an opportunity afterwards to go and work in a real working man's job. So I thought a little bit about getting serious and talking about the drug issue in the sport. I think I'll probably avoid that, other than to say that I am really proud to say and that I sleep well every night, and have an absolutely clean conscience when I say that I raced for 17 years on bread and water. And quite honestly, there are days that I regret not crossing the line. Because I probably left a lot of money and a lot of wins on the table. But you know what? My health is good, and like I said, I sleep well every night. I'm just really sick of people asking me how much of a boost Depot gives you, because quite frankly, I have no idea. So one last note, and it's finally my chance to say it. I'll say thanks for coming out, first of all. But after how many years? I don't know, 28 years after I started this incredible journey, I was going through all these records and reliving all these memories and piling bag upon bag of stuff and everything into the car that they brought down to my garage. But I was good, and I'm really stoked to say it. So anyway. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a fantastic journey. It's one that's nowhere near done. And again, thank you so much for coming out and honoring me tonight, and enjoy the rest of the evening.
Dream on, dream on, dream it up, dream come true.
Mike McCarthy. I want to thank, of course, Sutter Davis Hospital. We are going to leave the bar open for a little bit. Also, all of our inductees and all of our award recipients will be at the table at the rear, and they will be signing your programs, your cards, any other memorabilia you may have. And Mike McCarthy has like apparently 90 more minutes worth of stories to tell back there. Gary Ellis, congratulations, phenomenal job. George Mallory Hendy's, of course, what a story that is. And Dottie Sailing, just cannot say enough about Dottie. And I want to congratulate everybody that was recognized tonight. So we are off duty for now. Want to see you guys all back here next year. Bring a friend. And boy, we have some great classes of inductees coming in the next few years. So please support this wonderful institution. Thank you and good night.
The world is gonna roll me. I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. She was looking kind of dumb with her finger and her thumb in the shape